Today's daf we're going to be learning is Sanhedrin Daf Tzadi Aleph. Today's daf is sponsored by Sharona Schuster in loving memory for father Eliat Shimoff, Eliyahu Chaim ben Harav Ephraim. He enjoyed his family learning Torah in Israel. He was loved by all and a true Talmid Chacham. His love of learning encouraged me to learn daf at a later age, and I now see his passion. Yehi Zichro Baruch. Today's daf is sponsored by Becky Goldstein for a Fuash Lema grandson Eitan Ephraim ben Ayelet. We love for the success of a long and complicated surgery for Eitan to repair the nervous system from his shoulder to his fingertips from his injury in Gaza. May the operating team be shlichim ne'emanim bat Hashem. Okay, we are going to get started. We started with yesterday, Parak Chelek, very interesting chapter. If you haven't listened to Daf Mishal Henyan on it, worth listening. Also, I'll just remind you that Rabbanit Yafi Clymer is back with Machshava Shniya on second thought. And her topic this week, I think I mentioned it in class, but in case I didn't, was all about the death penalty, death in Tanakh, really. It was the focus. She's going to do a series on death penalty in Judaism throughout the ages. So the second one should be going up hopefully today. And a little connected to something we're going to learn today, although a little off topic, if your Hebrew is good, Meirav Tubal Kahana Shiur is going up today about how we determine motherhood with what do you call it, pundakaud, surrogacy, and when you have egg donations and who's the mother, and that's going to a little bit come out of a sugya from today. Very interesting topic. I'm trying to translate it from the Hebrew to Mabitzit. I think I'm saying it the right way, but some of these terms I only know in one language. Okay. Today's daf is going to be a numbers daf. Okay, the way we're going to remember this is going to be 3, 4, 5. Okay, we're going to start with threes. Okay, we're going to have three, even though it's not really three. It's just I'm counting it from today's daf. We have three more arguments between Caesar, one is with a Caesar, two are with heretics, and a Jew, two are with rabbis, one is with a man named Geviha ben Sisa, who we're going to get off on a tangent about, because once we bring him in, and the three arguments here are going to be relating to Tchiyat HaMetim, kind of all with a similar question, but answered in a bit of a different way, like how on earth does God resurrect the dead? Okay, if they've just turned to dust, that's really going to be the idea, and that's going to all have to do with Tchiyat HaMetim. If you remember yesterday, we started seeing all the sources for Tchiyat HaMetim from the Torah. We had 6 yesterday. Which psukim could we try to prove it from? Although we had a few more that were kind of put aside and not really accepted. Today, only at the very end of the daf, we're going to get back and we're going to have 5 more. That's going to bring us to the number 5. Okay, so we're going to start with 3 stories of a heretic or someone arguing with a rabbi or a Jew. Then from there, we're going to get off on a total tangent with this Geviha ben Sisa guy, who is going to basically also appear in 3 other stories having to do with a nation that comes against the Jews with a legal claim and going to bring it in front of Alexander of Macedon. Okay, Alexander of Macedon in the Gemara, who, if you want to learn more about him, Shuli wrote about him in Flashback this week. And we're going to have what his claim was to them. Each one has a very similar structure. We'll get back to that. That's the 3. Then we're going to have, so there's 2 groups of 3 there. We're going to have 4 conversations between Rebbe and Antoninus, seems to be also a Roman Caesar, a Roman emperor. But they have a good relationship. It's not exactly an argumentative relationship. It's more, he asks the question of Rebbe, Rebbe answers. And the first 2, Rebbe answers. And the second 2, Rebbe answers. Antoninus says, I think you're wrong. And Rebbe actually accepts Antoninus' answer. So that's another 4 interactions. And then we're going to go to 4 contradictions, contradictory psukim that have to do with something in the future, olam haba, the world to come, or resurrection of the dead, or mortality, or something having to do with afterlife. And then we're going to have the five more sources. We're going to end with, go back to sources for Tchiyat HaMetim from the Torah. Okay, so that's how we're going to remember our daf. So Amalei Kesar the Rabban Gamliel. At the very bottom of Tzadi Amud Bet, Amaritu Deshach Vechaye, Hahavu Afra, Va'afra Mikachaye. You say that there's resurrection of the dead, but dead people turn into dust. And once they're dust, how can you bring dust back to life and create life out of dust? Amalei Barte, his daughter says to him, and you might remember this from Sanhedrin 39, we had the same thing. Shav Keva Anama Hadran, leave Rabban Gamliel alone. I have the answer for you. I can answer the question. And she gives him a parable. Shnei Yotzrim Yesh Be'irenu. Imagine there's 2 people who create vessels. Echad yotzer min hamayim ve'echad yotzer min atit. One creates a vessel out of water, and one creates it out of, okay, potters. We can call them. Thank you, two potters. One creates it out of clay. Eze mehem mishubach. Which one are you more impressed by? Someone who could create a pot out of clay, or someone who could create it out of water? Obviously, whoever could create it out of water. Amar la, the Caesar says to her, Ze she'otzer min hamayim. Obviously, the one who created a pot out of water or a vessel out of water is obviously much more impressive. Amar le, so she says to him, Min hamayim tsar min atit lo kol sheken. If God could create humans from water, which basically means, right, the semen, the liquid, right, of the semen, that creates a child, minatzit kosher can, all the more so from dust, God could create a human. Debate Rabbi Yishmael Tana, in the house of Rabbi Yishmael, they said something similar, but a bit different. You could learn it from glass vessels. Right, the like a glass blower, right? So a person blows into the glass, a human blows it. And yet nishberu, if they break, yesh lam takana, you can fix them. Basar vadam sheberucho right. If this is for basar vadam humans, then sheberucho shel hakadosh baruch hu, that God gave us our spirit, right? God blew us, so to speak, into being. Al achakama v'kama, that God can fix us once we're broken, once we die. Okay, so two analogies here to how it's obvious that God can resurrect the dead from, once we're already created. Amar le'ahumina leRabbi Ami. Now we have Rabbi Ami with a heretic. Okay, so we started with the Caesar and Rabban Gamliel. In the end, the Caesar's daughter answers the question. Here we're going to have the mean, the heretic, and Rabbi Ami. Amaritu d'shach vechaye. You say the people, okay, same idea here. You say the people who die come back to life. V'havu afra mikachaya. Again, they're just dust. How can from the dust they come back to life? Amar lehem sholach hamashal. I'll bring you a parable. L'ma davar domeh. He brings a different parable. Lemelech basar vadam shamar lavadav lechu benuli paterin gedolim b'makom she'ein mayim v'afal. It's like a king who says to his servants, "Go build me a palace in a place where there's no water, there's no earth, there's no soil, there's no nothing, and go build it there." Meaning, go schlep your stuff from far away, bring it to there. Very hard to do, but they do it. Liam banu oto, so they build it. Liamim naflu, over time, eventually it gets destroyed, and they need to build a new one. Amar lahem chizru banu oto b'makom sheyesh afar umayim. So he says, go build it now in a place where there already is water and earth, soil. Amru lo, and anu yecholim. They say, oh, that's too hard. He gets angry at them and he says to them, I don't understand. You did it in such a complicated way in the first place, right? Now that I gave, there's water and dirt there now, all the more so, it should be easy. Okay, so now what's basically the nimshal is that, right, God created humans from almost nothing. Right? And then once they're created, it's much easier to bring them back to life than it is to create them in the first place. So it's the opposite of what the heretic thought. And here comes an interesting section, because this is based on the scientific beliefs in the time of the Gemara, which we no longer believe, okay? But they're using this as their proof. They believed in spontaneous generation. They thought that there were creatures that were created from the earth, okay? That kind of reproduced somehow from the earth, okay, and not from reproduction, like what we think of. So he says now, if you don't believe, okay, look at this particular creature, a particular type of mouse that they believe that this is what happened with it. It's partially flesh and partially from the earth, like it's made from the earth. And eventually it will multiply and it'll be completely flesh. Okay, but it starts from the earth. Shema tomar lizman merubena. You might say this is a process and it takes time till that happens. And we're talking about team, which, in the snap of a finger, God is going to make all this happen immediately. So maybe you can't learn from there. But alei lahar, again, they're going to bring a proof that's not exactly a scientific proof, certainly not the way we understand things now. But alei lahar, look at the mountains and you'll see there's one chilazon, one snail there. Tomorrow the rain will fall, and all these snails will come out. Now we all know, right? Rain brings out the snails, but what they believed is that the rain kind of made them all create, that they were created from the earth. Okay, and therefore he's basically saying this is a good proof for Tchiyat HaMetim. Again, we don't really believe that these proofs are good proofs because we know that scientifically this isn't the truth, but that's what they believe then, and here they used it as a proof. Okay, next, third in the set that we're talking about now. Amar le'ahu mina l'Geviha ben Pesisa. Okay, Geviha ben Pesisa apparently was a Kohen, it seems, but he's a person we don't know so much about him, although you'll see later he's definitely not considered of the rabbis and prominent people, but he obviously was a smart guy because you'll see he answers a lot of these questions. So here we have our third in the series of the heretic questions or heretic slash emperor questions. So the heretic says to Geviha ben Pesisa, Vai lachon chayava, woe to you, evil people, da amaritu mete chayin. You say that the dead come back to life. The chayin mete, I get that people who are alive die, but the mete chayin, but people who are dead come back to life? What kind of craziness? Amar le, he says back to him in the same language, Vai lachon chayav, woe to you, wicked people. Da amaritu mete lo chayin. You think dead people don't come back to life. De lo havu chaya. De havu chaya lo kol sheken. If they, okay, so again he says things that weren't elohavu chaya yet come to life, meaning right, people are born from nothing. So all the more so to have a chayu if they're already alive, lokoshken, that they could come back to life even after they die. So these three are all the same idea. They're each just saying it in different ways or using different proofs. Here he didn't really bring his proof is just right. If God could create something from nothing, then obviously God can create something from something. So now the heretic gets angry and he says, you called me a bad person? If I could, now we're going to learn right now that Geviha bar Pesisa was a hunchback. And he says, if I could, I would kick you and straighten out your hunchback. So Amar Le, Pesisa answers him in a kind of sarcastic kind of way. Im atau second, if you do that, Rofe umanti kare, you'll be a very well-known doctor. You'll be considered, wow, that doctor is amazing. The sachar harbeti and you'll make a lot of money. Like halavai would fix my hunchback. Okay, so that's the end of our three heretic stories that are all basically saying, how on earth could you possibly say that there's such a thing as chiyat hametim? And they all say, what do you mean? It's much easier to prove that than it is that God could create humans. God created humans. Obviously, God can fix humans that are broken, so to speak. Tanu Rabbanan. So now we're going to have a bright, and as I said, we're getting off on a tangent now about Geviha bar Pesisa. The common thread between the next three stories are they all have to do with a different nation, comes up against us, brings us to trial in, so to speak, in international court, right? They go to Alexander Macedon, okay? And they go to him and they say the Jews, and they use psukim from the Torah to prove that the Jews have something of ours, basically, has stolen, need to give it back. And then Geviha is going to say, oh, let me go and argue the case. Okay, he says, I want to be the lawyer, right? And I can go argue the case. He gives a whole reason to the rabbis why they should send him. And like basically he's going to say, you have nothing to lose. Okay, it's going to be the same in all the stories. And then he's going to say to them, what's your proof from the Torah? Oh, I can prove from the Torah that you're wrong. Okay, and that maybe you're right about something, but I'm more right about something else. And then they're going to basically leave the case alone. They're going to basically run away. So let's see our three stories. Tanu Rabbanan. Here's a braita about, if you remember, there's something called Megillat Ta'anit, where we have all these days that you're not allowed to fast because they're happy days and days where victories happen for the Jewish people. So this is a braita similar in style to that. Be'esrim va'arba'a b'Nisan, on the 24th of Nisan, it was a special day because intelitu dimosnai mi Yehuda Yerushalayim. All these people who were trying to usurp our land left Jerusalem and Judea. And we're going to see right now what happened, who these people were, and what their claim was, and why they ran off. Kishabao b'nei Afrikaya. Okay, the people who's Afrikaya. Okay, whatever exactly this means. There's debates about it, but we'll leave that aside right now. Not our main point. Ladunim Yisrael lifnei Alexandros Mokdon. Amrulo Eretz Canaan shelanuhem. They said the land of Canaan is ours. How so? Diftiv Eretz Canaan legvuloteha, because it's called Eretz Canaan and its boundaries. U'Canaan avuham dahanu inashe have. And our ancestor is Canaan, so it's our land, not your land. Amar lehu Geviha ben Pesisa lechachamim. So now, like I said, first Geviha has to go to the chachamim and convince them that he should be the lawyer. Give me permission to go and represent the Jewish people. And this is what his claim is. If they beat me, you can just say, oh, it was just a regular guy from among us. That wasn't our best. Okay, so that's not so serious that you won. And, I guess go send someone else. And this is why we see he wasn't such a prominent person. But if I beat them and I win the case, I'm not going to take the credit for myself. Say to them that it's the Torah of Moshe that beat you. Okay, meaning I'm just a representative of the Torah of Moshe if I win. So they gave him permission, and he went to go and deal with it. Amar lahem, so he says, where are you bringing your proof from? Which he knew already. They said from the Torah, but he wanted them to say it. Oh, our proof is from the Torah, as if that's our best claim against you. Amar lahem, afani lo avi lachem raya, ela min Torah. Okay, fine. So I won't bring my proof other than from the Torah, meaning I'll bring my proof also from the Torah. Shenema, vayomer arur Canaan. Remember, Canaan is supposed to be cursed. Why is Canaan? And what's his curse? Eved avadini yela achiv. He's going to be a slave to his brother. So basically, you guys should be slaves to me. And not only that, Eved shekana, if you're saying the land of Canaan is yours, well, when a slave acquires something, Eved lemi unechasim lemi. Who does the Eved work for? And who does the money belong to? To the master. And that's me, right? That's us. The Lord Ella. Sharei kama shanim shelo avadetuni. And not only that, but what about all those years? You owe us big time because you haven't worked as a slave for all these years. You owe us years and years of slavery. Amar lahem Alexander Malka. So Alexander the king says, Hachziru lo tshuva, give him an answer. Amru lo, tna lanu zman shlosha yamim. They said, can you give us 3 days? This is always famous in these stories. They always ask for 3 days. Sometimes it's the Jews saying, give us 3 days. Natan lem zman, he gave them time. But kuva lo matzu tshuva, they tried to find the answer, they couldn't find one. Miyad barchu, they ran away. And they left fields full of, right, they had already been planted, they already were growing things, and it was such a miraculous day because it was the Shemitah year and the Jews didn't have a lot of produce, and here they left them fields full of fruits and vegetables. Shuv pamachat, again, the same kind of thing happens. Ba'u b'nei Mitzrayim ladunim Yisrael lifnei Alexander of Macedon. The Egyptians come. Amru lo, harei womeo v'Hashem natan et chen ha'am be'enei Mitzrayim v'yishilum. What happened when the Jews left Egypt? Right, the Mitzrayim all of a sudden found favor in the Jews found favor in the eyes of the Egyptians, and they loaned them stuff. Remember, the Jews go out b'rechush gadol with a lot of stuff, but it says vayashilum. What is vayashilum? They loaned it to them. They lent it to them. They were supposed to return them. Never returned it. Right? Forget about interest and all that on all those years. So they say, give it back, right? We want all the gold and silver that you stole from us, or that you borrowed and never returned. Amar Geviha ben Pesisa l'chachamim, same thing is going to say to them. Alexandrus, give me permission to go. If they beat me, imrulam, just say to them, you just beat a small person in our community. That's nothing. But if I beat them, I win. Right? I'm just a representative of Moshe and say it's the whole Torah of Moshe that beat you. Natznula Rishut, so they gave him permission, and he went to court. Amar lahem, again, same thing. Where's your proof? Amru lo min Torah. They said from the Torah. Amar lahem, afani lo avi lachem raya min Torah. Fine, I'll bring you proof from the Torah also. Shene'emal u'moshav b'nei Yisrael sheyeshvu b'Mitzrayim 30 shana v'arba shana. The number of years the Jews worked as slaves, even though it's not really the case, it's really counting from the time of Abraham, but it's 430 years. Okay, let's do the math. 600,000 people worked for you for 430 years. You didn't pass a cent. So you owe us all that back pay. Alexander So Alexander says, give him an answer. Same thing as before. We need 3 days. He gave them 3 days, but they couldn't find an answer. Right? Again, they left fully planted fields and vineyards, and it happened to be the Shemitah year, and the Jews won the jackpot. V'shuv pamachat ba'u b'nei Yishmael u'b'nei Keturah ladunim Yisrael lifnei Alexander of Macedon. Now we have another nation. Who's this? The sons of Yishmael and the sons of Keturah. These were all the concubine, the children of the concubines of Abraham. And again, okay, so the first was land. Eretz Canaan belongs to us. The second was you owe us a lot of money, jewels, gold and silver. The third is back to land, and they claim Eretz Canaan shalanu v'shalachem. We should share the land. Okay, when they're not saying you don't deserve the land, but they're saying we should share it. We're all the sons of Abraham. If the land was given to Abraham, it's ours too. אמר להם גביע בן פסיסה לחכמים, תנו לי רשות ואלך ואדוני מהם לפני אלכסנדרוס מקדון, אם ינצחוני אמרו הדיוט שבנו ניצחתן. אם אני אנצח אותם, אמרו להם תורת משה רבנו ניצחתכם. נתנו לו רשות והלך ודן עמהם. Okay, same thing, he basically says, let me go, and they give him permission. אמר להם, היכן אתם מביאים ראיה? Where's your proof? אמרו לו מן התורה, they said the Torah. אמר להם, אף אני לא אביא ראיה למן התורה. My proof will also come from the Torah. שנאמר, as it says. Vayitain Abraham et kol asher lo liYitzchak. Abraham decided to give everything he had to Yitzchak. Ulivnei pilagshim asher Abraham natan Abraham matano. And to all the sons of the concubines, which includes Ishmael, Keturah, all that, right? The sons of Keturah, he gave gifts. So Av shenatan gitin lebanav b'chayav v'shiger zeh me'al zeh. And not only that, the pasuk says, and then he sent them off. So a father who decides that he's giving all of his inheritance to one son and basically sends the other ones off. Right? So klum yesh lezeh al klum, klum yesh lezeh al zeh klum. Right? Basically, they have no claim. If the father decides I'm giving all my inheritance to one son, the other sons can complain. My matanot, what are these matanot? He gave Amr Masar Shem Tum'ah. He gave them Tum'ah. Rashi says it means he gave them kishuf and things like that. Okay, that was the matanot he gave them. It's a little bit strange of a gift for to give him, but Rashi says kishuf, witchcraft, and maaseh shedim, and actions of evil spirits. Okay, so there were our three stories of Geviha bar ben Pesisa. Okay, there were four of Geviha ben Pesisa, but the first is part of the first category of the heretics or Caesars against the emperors against the Jews, and the arguments about Tchiyat HaMetim. From them, we moved on to three nations coming to claim either land or money that the Jews owe them, and each time the Jews win the argument. Okay, notice the last story doesn't end with they left the land because they weren't living in the land, right? It wasn't like they were living in the land and then had this argument with them and then ran off. Amar le Antoninus the Rebbe. Now we start fours. Okay, the four stories, the four questions that Antoninus, the emperor, is going to ask Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, and they were friends. They were known to have a nice relationship. Guf unishama yicholim lachtor etzmam min hadin. Here's a creative one. The body and the soul, when they get up to the heavens, okay, this is again, after death, and God, we assume there's some sort of judgment of the body and the soul after death, they can each claim they're not liable. Okay, if we go to court case and trying to get out of things, they can each claim we're exempt. Ketzad. Well, gufo me'el nishama chatat. Shemiyom shepersha mimeni hareini mutal ke'evan dumam bakevet. The body could say, look, it's clearly the soul because since I died, I've just been like a rock, doing nothing, not moving. I'm an inanimate object. I'm obviously not the cause of the sin because I'm just lying here dead. Uneshama umeret guf chata. The neshama says, what do you mean? It's the body. Shemiyom sheperash shemimenu. When I separated from the body, hareini poracha ba'avir ketzipor. I'm a free spirit like a bird. I'm just floating around, and obviously that shows that I'm not responsible. Amar le, I'm sure, right? Like my end was much better than the body's end. It's just stuck in the ground. Amar leim sholach hamashal lemad var domeh. So Rebbe says here, I'll give you a parable. Lemelech basar vadan, there was a king, shayalo pardes ne'eh, he had a nice orchard. Vahayu bo bakurot naot, and he had these beautiful, the first figs that came out, that bloomed. Voshiv bo shnei shomrim, and he put two guards to watch them. Echad chiger, one couldn't walk, ve'echad suma, and one couldn't see. Amar, and he figured this was good because one can't walk, so the one who can't walk can't get to it. The one who's blind can't see, so he won't take it. So he thought this was a perfect setup. Okay, we're at the top of Amud now. Amar lo chiger la suma. But they were smart. And the chiger says to the suma, the one who can't walk says to the blind person, Bakurod naod ani roeh b'pardes. You can't see them, but I see these fruits. Bo v'harkiveni, put me, right, carry me on your shoulders. Viniviem lochlam, right? I can't walk to get them, and you can't see them, but if you carry me on your shoulders, we'll be able to get them, and then we'll share them. Rachav chiger al gabe suma, so he rode on the blind person, vehevium va'achalum, and he brought them back, and they ate them. Liyamim ba'bala pardes. So now the owner of the orchard comes back. Amar lahem bakulot naod hechanim. Where are the beautiful fruits? Amar lo chiger klum yesh li raglayim la'alech behem. The chiger says, look, I don't have legs to walk. Amar lo suma klum yesh einayim le'rot. I don't see them. I don't have eyes. I can't see. Mesa, but the bala pardes, the owner of the orchard, was smart. He put the person who couldn't walk on top of the person who couldn't see, and he judged them as one. Likewise, so when you're up there in Shamayim after the person dies, God combines the two, even though they've separated at death. For the judgment, they come back together, just like the chiger and the suma, and God judges them as one. Shne'emal, and here's a reference to it in a pasuk from Tehillim. Yikra l'shamayim me'ali, will call out to the heaven above, ve'el ha'aretz l'dinimo, and to the land below to do judgment with him. Yikra l'shamayim me'al zo neshama, right? He has to call what's up in the heavens is the soul. Ve'el ha'aretz, and what's in the ground, l'dinimo zeh haguf, that's the body. Okay, that was question one. Question two. Amar Antoninus the Rebbe. The first two Rebbe is going to answer. The second two, after Rebbe answers, Antoninus is going to correct him, and Rebbe is going to stand corrected. Amar Antoninus the Rebbe. Why does the sun set in the east rise in the east and set in the west? Amar what, you're asking me that? You could have asked me the same. If it was the opposite, you'd ask me the same thing. Why does it rise in the west and set in the east? No, what I wanted to ask you is this. I want to understand why it sets in the west. I'm not saying why does it start there and end there. I want to know why it ends in the west at the end of the day. Wants to say shalom, like say goodbye, and we're going to see in a minute, really bow to God on its way down. The hosts in the sky bow down to God. So basically, God, what we're saying is God is in the west, and the sun sets in the west to basically bow down toward God. Amar le, so Antoninus continues to question. Now, normally when you bow down to a king, you don't go right up to the king. You keep your distance and bow from a distance. So why doesn't the sun stay in the middle of the sky? And then from there, just set, okay? And that would be a better way. If really the idea is it's bowing to God, it would be a more appropriate, respectful way than instead of going all the way to God and bowing right in front of God's face. So Amar le, it doesn't say Amar le, but obviously this is the answer of Rabbi. Mishum po'alim u'mishum ovrei drachim. Basically, Rabbi says there's a good reason why this doesn't happen, because if that happened, people who are working in the fields or working out at whatever job they're doing, or passerbys, right, those who are on there traveling, won't realize that night is coming. And all of a sudden, it'll get dark in a minute without any sort of warning, right? We all know that you start to see warning signs of night coming and you feel the night coming. Now, nowadays, it's not as big a deal because we have street lamps and all that. But in those days where there weren't street lamps and you couldn't see at night, people need to know when the end of the day is. So if it happens gradually, that's a much better way. If it happens in a second, we're going to all be stuck and say, oh my goodness, how am I getting home right now? So it's for some other reason why it's done in the way it's done. V'amar Antoninus leRebbe. Third question. When is the soul put into a person? This is from where Meirav got off on her, what determines, is it the creation of the Vlad or the one carrying it? So when is the soul put into the Adam? Either Mishat Kida, when the woman gets pregnant, or Mishat Yitzira, or when the fetus starts developing, which usually we say is 40 days after the beginning stage, okay, or perhaps it's a later stage, but some sort of stage of fetal development. So when does the soul come in? So Amarle, Mishat Yitzira, Rebbe says from the time that the fetus is created, okay, not the very beginning. The soul's not there at the very beginning. So Antoninus says to him, I understand, you can't leave meat for 3 days without it rotting. So you can't leave a body without a soul in it, without it rotting. It won't survive without a neshama. So it must be elam mishap kidah. It must be from the first moment of conception. I'm a Rebbe, and then Rebbe says, Davar zelim dani Antoninus. From this I learned from Antoninus, and in the end I changed my mind. Mikra Messiah. Oh, and there's a pasuk even to support his reading. Shneimar upkudatcha shamra ruchi. Okay, pkudatcha is a reference here, right? It's an allusion to, it's a pasuk from Eov, from Shat Pkida, from the time of conception. Shamra ruchi, my ruach is already in the humans. V'amar le'Antoninus l'Rebbe, me'ematai yetzer hara sholet ba'adam. When does the evil inclination come to a human? Mishat yitzira or mishat yitzia? Here we have, okay, nobody thinks from conception, but perhaps when the fetus is already starting to develop or at birth. So Amar le mishat yitzira, he says it must be the evil inclination is there from the very beginning, okay, from when the creation of the fetus. Amar le, Antoninus says, in Kimbo Yotze. He says something very fascinating. If the evil inclination were there, it would push the fetus to get out of there quicker, and the babies would be born before their time. Because, the evil inclination is always pushing things to be doing things against what you might have naturally thought. And therefore, we'd have a lot more premature babies or something, okay? So it's an interesting thought, thinking the Yetzer Hara would push the fetus out, and therefore, it must be Mishat Yitzia. It must be the evil inclination is not there until the baby comes out. Amar Rebbe, Davar Zeh Limdani Antoninus. Again, he says this I learned from Antoninus, Mikra Messiah, and there's a proof in the pasuk. In a pasuk, again, not exactly, but we could see it. Shneimar lepetach chatat rovetz. Okay, so the way he understood this is at the petach, when it opens, when it comes out, that's where the sin is. That's where the sin is hovering. Okay, and therefore that's his proof. So those are the four questions. Antoninus asks Rebbe. The first two Rebbe answers, and Antoninus accepts his answer. The second two Antoninus argues with his answer, and Rebbe changes his mind and holds by Antoninus. These are obviously very different from the questions we started with, where it was a heretic or an emperor who was trying to make a point and kind of mock the Jewish people. Here we have a respectful conversation. Now we're going to have another set of the four contradictions. We're going to have four contradictory psukim relating to something in the afterlife or something like that. Rish Lakish, Rami. Okay, Rami means he throws these two psukim up against each other. K'tiv, it says, Bam iver v'pisech harav yoled yachdav. When people come back, when there's a resurrection of the dead, they're going to come back, even the blind and all the people with any sort of disability are going to come back also. In other words, it's even people with blemishes are going to come back to life. Uchtiv az yedalei ka'ayal pisech v'taron lashon ilain ki nifka'u b'midbar mayim u'nechalim ba'arava. Then it says, also talking about this future time, where the pisech who can't walk is all of a sudden going to be skipping, and the person who can't speak is going to be speaking, skipping, and the person who can't speak is going to be speaking. The mute can all of a sudden talk. So in the first pasuk, it sounds like they're going to come back as they were in the first world. In the second one, it sounds like they're going to come back cured. So how do you explain that? Haketzad, umdim b'muman u'metrapim. First, they're going to come back to life as they were, and then God will heal them. So they're describing two separate instances, right? Two separate parts on the timeline. Ula Rami. Ula brings a contradiction. K'tiv bilah hamavet lanetz u'machashem dima me'al kol panim. Okay, this is a good pasuk for us for this year. The death will be swallowed up. There won't be such a thing as death. And God will wipe all the tears off of people's faces, meaning people won't be crying anymore because there won't be no death and sadness in the world. That's describing some, right? Again, this is the assumption is we're talking about after Tchiyat HaMetim in the world to come, right? People will live forever. Uktiv, but a different pasuk says, Ki adar be'mea shana yamut, v'lo yeh misham od ul yamim. So then they say a child will die only at 100 years old, meaning people will live very long lives, but they will die at 100 years old. So what is there? They're going to live forever, or are they going to live only till 100? Loka, right? They're both obviously describing something different from what's going on now, but not the same thing. Lokasha kam Yisrael kam be'umot ha'olam. The Jews are going to live forever. The Gentiles are going to die at 100 years in the future time. Ve'umot ha'olam ma ba'u hatam. What are Gentiles doing? They're also going to be resurrected. I thought it was just Jews. The whole debate about exactly which Jews are going to be resurrected. There's lots to say about that. Again, nobody really knows any of the answers to these questions. So they say, what are these Gentiles doing there? There's those who it says about them. Okay, the Zarim, the Gentiles, are going to be they're going to work for you. They're going to be your shepherds, and they're going to be your farmers, and work in your vineyards. Okay, they're going to serve the Jewish people in that future time. Again, a hard concept to get around, this whole thing, that's the only purpose they have. Okay. Again, this whole thing is hard to understand. So just add it to the list. Rav Chisda Rami. So Rav Chisda brings a contradiction between these two psukim. When God is going to ultimately rule, you won't even see the sun or the moon. The light of God is going to be so strong, right? That's what happens, right? When the sun is out, you don't see the moon, right? So the light of God is going to be so strong, you won't even see the sun or the moon, it will darken. Ukti, vaya or levana or chama. And there's a different pasuk which says that the light of the moon is going to be like the light of the sun. The light of the sun is going to be 7 times the light that comes out of 7 days. Okay, meaning the light of the sun is going to shine so bright. So these are, again, describing future times, but in opposite ways. One is saying you won't see the sun at all, and one is saying the sun is going to be so bright. Lo kasha kan Yemona Mashiach kan la'olam haba. Okay, in Yemona Mashiach, it's going to be better, and the light of the sun is going to be so strong. Okay, I don't think they mean the destruction of the ozone layers and strong in a bad way, but they're saying the light of the sun will be so beautiful and so strong as a good sign. That'll be in the times of the Messiah. After that, in the Atid Lavo, like the Olam Haba, the world to come, again, hard to understand what all these different things are, but then the light of God will be so strong, and then it will basically outshine the sun and the moon. But they say l'Shmuel, but according to Shmuel, the times of the Messiah are going to be no different. The only difference between the times of the Messiah now, it's not going to be like some futuresque utopian world. It's just going to be that we're going to be our own rulers. No one is going to rule over the Jewish people. Then, lo kashya kam b'machane tzadikim, kam b'machane shechina. Okay, the difference between the two psukim is going to be all la'atid lavo, nothing having to do with Yemona Mashiach. There's not going to be any huge light or anything. But in the world to come, there's going to be, for the tzaddikim, it will be the light of the sun is very strong because of the tzaddikim and their greatness. But in where the machaneh shechina is, where God's presence is, then God's presence is going to be much stronger and outshine the sun. Okay, again, what it means, the machaneh tzaddikim and the machaneh shechina and the olam haba, I can't really explain to you. Rava Rami, fourth contradiction. Rava brings contradiction. K'tiv ani amit ve'echayeh. I will kill and I will bring them back to life, which again, Tchiyat HaMeitim. Here, by the way, we get another pasuk, a 7th pasuk for Tchiyat HaMeitim. God brings people back to life. Uchtiv machatzti v'ani arpa. It says, I will hit and I'll wound people and then I will cure them. What exactly the contradiction is, it's not so clear, okay? But it seems like if God brings to life and then brings back people back to life, then why does he need to kill the wounded? It's unclear exactly how we see a contradiction here. Some people think that it's I will heal the wounded in when there's Tchiyat HaMeitim, but didn't he already bring them back to life? So why is he healing the wounded? Anyway, we'll see the resolution in a minute. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, Ma shani memit ani mechayeh, v'hadar ma shemachatzti v'ani arpa. And this goes back to what we saw before. What died, I will bring back to life. And then, let's say they were blemished, I will fix their wounds. Okay? Next, because we're already on this pasuk, we're just going to bring a braita about this pasuk. Tana Rabbanan ami ami ve'echayeh, yachoshtem mita be'echad v'chayim be'echad, kederach sha'olam noheg. You might have thought this pasuk isn't talking about Tchiyat HaMeitim at all. Ani amit ve'echayeh could be I make people, right? I bring people to life and I make people die, meaning I create humans and humans die, meaning this one dies and this one is created. They're two different things. Okay, then we're not talking about the same person. I bring back to life those who I killed or those who died. So Talmud Lomar, so that you don't think that pasuk is, listen to the end of that pasuk. Machatzti v'ani arpeh. Now, ma mechitza, the wound, or refuah be'echad. We're talking about I wounded the person and then I cured them. So I healed them. So you have the same person it's dealing with here. So from there, you learn that the other pasuk, right, af mitav v'chayim be'echad, that the first, right, that the other pasuk we were talking about, right, it's the same pasuk. It's the pasuk reads, Re'u ata ki ani anihu ve'en Elohim imadi ani amit ve'chayim machatzi v'ani arpa ve'en matzil miyadi. Okay, so that's the pasuk. So if that part is talking about one person, then the first part is also talking about one person as well. And from there, you learn. Right? Mikam tshuva la'omrim ein Tchiyat HaMeitim min Torah. And here's an answer to those who say, it's interesting, they're not even just saying, here's a source for Tchiyat HaMeitim from the Torah. They're saying, here's the response to those who claim there is no Tchiyat HaMeitim from the Torah. Right? It was clear that there were people saying it. That was the whole thing, what we started with. If you say there's no Tchiyat HaMetim from the Torah, you don't have a part in the Olam Haba. Okay, now we're going to get to, so that was source 7, because yesterday we had 6. Now we're going to go to 8 and 9. Tanya Amar Rabbi Meir. Minayin l'Tchiyat HaMetim min Torah. So Rabbi Meir says, what's my source for Tchiyat HaMetim from the Torah? Shene'emal. Az Yashir Moshe v'nei Yisrael et hashira hazo. Now, what should it have said? Shar lo ne'emar ela Yashir. Right? Az Yashir Moshe. Then Moshe will sing. What do you mean? Then Moshe sang. Right? Why does it say Moshe will sing? Back to this. Any pasuk, most of these pasukim, we're going to all be talking in the future tense. I think all of them that we're going to see today. And from there, we're going to learn Mikan l'Tchiyat HaMetim min Torah, because Moshe will sing in the future. Kayotze b'davar ta'omil. Another pasuk like this. That's why I said we're getting to 8 and 9, because these are both one and the same. Az yivnei Yehoshua mizbeach la'Hashem. Yehoshua will build a mizbeach to God. Bana lo ne'emar. It should have said then Yehoshua built. Right? It's the same as az yashir, az yivneh. Ela yivneh mikan l'tchiyat ha'metim min Torah. So again, it's saying in the future, Yehoshua, when he comes back to life, he will build. When he's resurrected from the dead, he will build a mizbeach to God. But ela me'ata, okay. So you're now saying, Az Yashir, Az Yivneh. All that means in the future, right, in some utopic time, this thing is going to happen again. Well, Elameata, Az Yivneh Shlomo B'melech L'kmosh Shikutz Moav. Okay, Shlomo, if you remember, at the end of his days, he turns away from God because he marries all these women, these non-Jewish women, and they sway him from God. And it says he built an altar to Kmosh, the god of Moab. So, Hachinami Yivneh, what? In some future time when Shlomo comes back to resurrected, he's going to build like this beautiful thing. It's not really what we're looking for. So, how are you going to say Az Yivneh and Az Yashir is talking about Tchiyat HaMetim? Elam, no, this one is different. Okay, it's not like the others. This is the reason why it's in the future is for a different reason. Elam alav katuv ki'ilu bana. He didn't actually build it. It said Az Yivneh, it's as if he built it. Okay, there it has a different meaning. But the Yivneh of Yoshua and the Yashir of Moshe can be described as Tchiyat HaMetim. Source number 10. Amar Rabbi Shua ben Levi minayin l'Tchiyat HaMetim min Torah shneimar. Interesting, you say this all the time. Ashrei yoshvei beitecha. Right? Happy are those who dwell in your house. Od yahalalu chasela. They will praise you in the future. Again, future. Hilalucha lo ne'amar. Should have said Ashrei yoshvei beitecha. Od hilalu chasela. They are constantly praising you. But no, it says yehalalucha. They will. Ela yehalalucha mikan l'Tchiyat HaMetim min Torah. It means it's some future time. And Amar Rabbi Shua ben Levi, and he takes this and says the following. If you sing praise to God in this world, you will be worthy to be the ones who are Yahalalucha in the world to come. Now this is going to change the way you think when you say Ashrei every day. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, we're on our last source 11. Shneemal Kol Sofayach Nasu Kol. Yachdav Yiranenu. Okay, they're going to have a call. They're going to sing out. Yachdav, together they will praise. Rinenu lo ne'amar. It doesn't say they praise. Ela Yiranenu in the future. Mikam l'Tchiyat HaMetim min Torah. Right. So all the psukim we saw today are all in the future tense. The point being in the future in Tchiyat HaMetim, when the dead are resurrected. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Atidim kol neviim kulan lomar shira b'kol echad. Okay, all the prophets are going to say shira in one voice. Shenemar kol tzofayich. Tzofayich are those who see you. That's the prophets. The voice of your tzofayich nasu kol yachdav yiranenu. They're all going to do it together in one voice. Okay, so that's just an aside about that. Now we're going to start another sugya, which we're only going to see the connection in tomorrow's daf, but it's very famous Gemara here. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amarav were very interesting. Kol hamoneh halacha mipi talmid. Anyone who withholds a halacha from a talmid and doesn't teach him Torah, halacha. Ki'ilu goes lo min hachalat avotav. It's like he's stealing from his inheritance. Shneimar Torah tzivalanu Moshe morasha kila Yaakov, because the Torah was commanded to us from Moshe. Moshe commanded us and gave it as an inheritance to the congregation of Jacob. Morasha lechol Yisrael mishesh emei breshit. They say even dating back to shesh emei breshit, this was our inheritance. So if you don't teach someone Torah, fascinating line. Notice also it says kol Yisrael, including women, including men. It doesn't say only men. The Torah is an inheritance of everybody, and therefore you cannot withhold Torah from anybody. It's like stealing from them. And Amar Rav Chamar Bar Bizna Amar Rav Shimon Chasida Kol Hamoneh Halacha Mipi Talmid Afilu Ubarin Shebeimei Imo Mekalelin Oto. Another thing about someone who doesn't teach, that even the fetuses in their mother's womb, going back to them today, will curse him. I'm going to just read a little bit more. Moneh Bar Yikavuhu Laom. Okay, now what do these words mean? Okay, really it means something else in the simple reading, but they're going to say Ein Laom Ela Ubarim. Laom is fetuses. Shne'amaru Laomi Laom Yamat. That's from the prophecy that Rivka gets when they're in her the twins are fighting inside. Ein Kabbalah Klala. Shne'amar Ma'akov Lo Kaboel. That's from Bilam. It's a curse. Ein Bar Ela Torah. Bar is usually wheat, but here it means Torah. Shne'amar Nashku Bar Pen Yanaf. Okay, and basically they say that pasuk is saying if you don't Manu Bar, if you don't give Torah, then Yikabuhu Le'om. They will be cursed by the womb, the baby in the womb. Okay, so 3, 4, 5 is going to be our way to remember this dot. The 3 questions of the Caesar, the heretic, or the emperor to the Jews about is Tchiyat HaMeitim from the right? How can you possibly believe in Tchiyat HaMeitim? Then we have the 3 of Geviha ben Pesisa, of the nations that came against us in the international court and said, give us back our land or the money that you took from us, and how he was smart enough to outwit them. 4 questions of Antoninus to Rebbe about how things work in the world. And then 4 contradictions about some future or time. Then 5 more sources, right? Was it 5? Yeah, 5 more sources about Tchiyat HaMeitim from the Torah. And then we just ended with this idea about not withholding a halacha from a student. With that, we finish for today. Wishing everyone a good day.